Whakataka te hau ke te uru. Whakataka te hau ke te tonga. Kia mā kina ke uta. Kia mā taratara ke tai. He aki ana te atakura. He tō, he hoka, he hauhu. Hei Māori ora.
All right. I'm working on the basis that Bruce will have an introduction for a moment and the others will arrive back. But we're going to go to item 7.4 as Bruce, who is sitting at the end of the table, is going to speak to his paper, Waikato Regional Plan, Flood Control and Drainage Rules. And this comes about because a number of the members have raised issues about permitted activities and the likes. And Bruce is running that through at the moment with a review of the regional plan, and particularly, and the review is isolated to elements in relation to water and one other subject, isn't it, Bruce? Yep,
it's fresh water and some rules in the regional coastal plan too, which have been reviewed recently.
Right, yeah, so it's not a complete review of the regional plan. So we'll kick off straight away. And Craig, if you and Peter, if you want to come over here, and Craig's come in, yeah, if we can, and then Peter, you're up the front here. Can we swap Eugene for Peter Thompson? All right, so if we can hand over to Bruce, we're in your hands.
Before you do that, Mr. Chairman, can I just introduce Bruce quickly, just to the members?
If you want.
So yeah, I just want to welcome Bruce to the meeting today.
Chris, no, sorry, Craig, can you just jump one because he's coming back? Craig's go where Brendan is, and Messy's coming later. Just go where Brendan is, please. No, Craig, you go where Chris is, and let's get going.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just want to welcome Bruce to the meeting this morning. He has made some alternative arrangements to be here this morning, and I thank Bruce. Bruce is our manager in resource management policy based in our SPY directorate, and this follows on from the paper that is tabled today that Bruce presented to the Integrated Catchment Management Committee meeting last year. So without further ado, Mr. Chairman, I'll hand over to Bruce just to make some introductory comments, and we'll take some questions and comments from his presentation. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam, and morning, everyone. Yeah, the paper I've got for you today, which I'll take as read, is the same paper that was presented to the ICM committee in September. Really, the paper is a summary of the present rules in the regional plan regarding land drainage activities and also the regional coastal plan. Please note that all the rules in regards to freshwater in the regional plan are presently under review as part of the freshwater policy review, which is in train. And the coastal plan rules are also being reviewed at the moment. Hearings on the coastal plan commence on Monday next week, and will take about 15-20 days of hearing to go, and hopefully we'll have a decision from the committee by the middle of this year. So my paper just really summarises those rules. And provides an oversight of what's in the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, the regulations that affect from the National Environmental Standard for Freshwater, and some comments on the RMA freshwater planning process, which we have to work through, just a statutory process that we have to go through under Schedule 1 of the RMA, and also some comments on private plan changes. Perhaps a quick note on the national direction. Please note that the NPSFM and the National Policy Statement Freshwater and the NES Freshwater all being reviewed by central government at the moment. We're expecting a discussion document on those instruments to come out in the next few weeks, with changes to be made to those documents by the middle of this year, is the government's current timetable for review of all those instruments, including all national instruments.
Just bring Brendan up here.
Yeah. So
essentially, we've got a bunch of, like the FM 2020 and so on, that's all been scuppered by the government in the indicated change of direction. So that those changes, just explain, those changes have been basically already put to one side. So are we in a vacuum, or are we just, they haven't been put to one side?
We've still got the MPS FM 2020,
Yes.
which we still
in its entirety?
Yes, which we still have to comply with.
Yep.
Give effect to until we've got a change in the national direction, until they put a new national MPS FM in place.
So council has indicated, I'm not sure that we've given direction,
Yeah.
just remind me if we have,
Yeah.
that we want this to go slowly until those changes are actually made, so we're not doing or duplicating or doing work that's unnecessary.
That's correct, and that's precisely what we're doing with the freshwater policy review. When we will be taking into account all that new national direction which comes through, probably by the middle of this year, and we're not intending to notify the timetable for notification of the freshwater policy review is late 2027, which will give us plenty of time to actually work the new national direction.
Okay, so there's a number of people in the room who have raised previously, and we've had meetings with you.
Yeah.
Another one spoke to me this morning,
Yep.
not appreciating that this paper really talked about the permitted activities. That was John. Where's he gone? Is he still moving his car? So how best to progress where we get to, and maybe is this time to bring you in, Robbie, on the what we think, or how are you going to work with the community to implement that new direction, and also the requirement or the request that council does more permitted activities. So can you talk to that? How the aspirations of the community may be considered if finalising the changes in the regional plan? I'm putting you on the spot. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. No, fine, Mr. Chairman. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I've been a lot longer than the council.
Excuse me. We've got some. We're working through our engagement at the moment. So at the moment, I suppose we're quite focused on setting up a new freshwater committee with iwi and council for the Waikato Waipa catchment. So we're just doing some work around that at the moment. But also we've got some stakeholder engagement planned for the middle of the year. So we've got a whole sort of stakeholder engagement process that will be coming up. We'll be meeting with key stakeholders at the moment, and that's scheduled at the moment for mid this year, I understand. And then moving into the latter part of the year, early next year, we'll be doing some community consultation. So there's opportunities to be involved as a stakeholder, with stakeholder consultation.
And I know there's people in the room who are concerned about making sure that the aspirations of the landowners are concerned. So, Robbie, do you want to just pick up on that?
Yeah, I'll just go through the discussion that myself and Bruce and Chris McClay had the other day, and I think I don't want to see this the Lower Waikato put a motion forward because it's outside of our terms of reference. So I don't really want that to happen, because me and Noel will not be allowed. No, we won't be allowed to. It would be very difficult for us to proceed in pushing that forward through ICM. I think that's a fair statement. So I had the discussion with Bruce and Chris McClay the other day that we'd like a couple of members in the Lower Waikato and maybe the Hauraki flood protection drainage groups to become stakeholders, that then Bruce can have these discussions during your freshwater review, and you can have that real good input at the base when it's required, instead of trying to argue it around this table, because it's not the place for it to be. When the terms of reference of this committee, and they may change in 12 months' time where there's a new committee and a new council, that's fine. But at the moment, that's not the place to fight this. And we'll discuss it. Well, we can discuss it here, but it's best to be taken to Bruce and go through the freshwater review. And that's where you get your input to try and lead council and making a different decision or having in that way. So my point of view right here, right now would be that we put an action forward to Bruce to ask that we'll have a membership of, say, 6 members of 3 of each committee and would be stakeholders in representation of the new freshwater review. So that's what I would ask if everyone's happy with that. It's a much easier and faster way to proceed this in the future. And it shows Bruce is willing to work with you guys because that's an action. It will be put down as an action and it's easier to move it forward. So I'll leave it there.
Open it up for
Discussion.
So just use the button on the right on your speaker. So, and we can only have 4. Don't turn yours off, Bruce. So. Yeah,
I'll leave it on then.
you and I hold. And
Okay.
Okay, Trevor, you go first.
Thank you. I'll just backpedal a bit from our last meeting. I asked for this to go on the agenda as a special item, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing it up early in the meeting. Look, I suppose just backpedal a bit. What my concern and any others in the room here is that all existing flood protection assets and flood protection and drainage assets up for upgrade, operation and maintenance and all this sort of thing should be done under permitted activity. So I'm not talking about the rules that are coming. Bruce, we had a good discussion. I'm talking about the rules that are here, operating today. And with the report you put out, Bruce, for the ICM, which was brilliant, and we've had a discussion about that. When you read through that, there's 2 comments in here. It says here on number 17 that our predecessors, when they wrote this, they said that all the intent of all stop banks and drainage assets, once they've been consented, no need for a consent anymore. Okay, that's the intent of that there. So somebody put a lot of thought to say, hey, one day these have to be upgraded. And so let's not muck around. Okay, so then we turn over, that's pretty clear there. And then we turn over to the next page, 136, National Environment Standards for Fresh Water, which I believe is, the new stuff, NES 2020.
Yep.
That's fine. And it's got in here, maintenance and operation of specified infrastructure and other infrastructure. Regulation 46, as a condition of a permitted activity, that activity must comply with the general conditions relating to the natural inland wetlands. Fine. But not if the activity is for the purpose of maintaining or operating any public flood control, flood protection and drainage works that are specified infrastructure. So reading that, you would have to assume that all existing stuff, flood protection and drainage, is exempt as far as freshwater standards. Now that's written by the policy department of this council and presented 6 months ago, 3 months ago.
Mr. Chair,
Is that correct?
Hang on, Trevor. Bruce.
Yeah, the NES is actually central government regulation, and it's not our regulation. So this
I thought that NES overrode everything else.
it overrides all the provisions in our plan. Yes.
And it says here that the existing flood protection and drainage are exempt.
So what does that really mean?
It can be all permitted activity. Surely.
What paragraph are you referring to?
It's 23.
23C, is it?
Yeah.
And so on one hand, Mr. Chairman, you correctly say that nobody can break the law, but the intent has to be exercised. Well, the first clause, the intent, they even use the words, the intent is that it's permitted activity. And over here, it says quite clearly, it's all exempt from the NES. So why, you got information from the amount of money spent on consent processes for existing stuff for the last 5 years, and there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars been spent on getting consents when council policy clearly states that was unnecessary.
So the issue there is the way I'm reading it is as a condition of a permitted activity, this hasn't been declared a permitted activity, has it?
No.
But it should be.
But it's not-
But could it be?
It's not in our plan. I mean, we could look at that issue and when we're reviewing the plan, yeah, but it's
No,
something
it's
that we
here now.
No,
It's
no,
here now.
Trevor, you've got to look at the words. As a condition of a permitted activity. So it's got to be declared to be a permitted activity within the plan. So what you're asking for is that the plan is updated to match the ability to do it under the NES. So it's not as you're seeing it, it's the words. And so sadly, having been around here for far too long in local government, you get to understand where the words, what they're meaning. So as a condition of a permitted activity, it hasn't been declared a permitted activity under our plan.
But back up the bus a bit. On the first clause here, it says,
And just remind me what clause that is.
17A.
Yep.
the original provisions for ICM and landowners to undertake activities. That is not the NES, that is the existing rules in here. And it says that all that stuff should be permitted activity because that was the intent of it all. And we've been banging on about that. And all of a sudden the NES was brought in to say this sumps everything else and you have to work with that. And lo and behold, council policy comes out that the NES doesn't affect that stuff.
But if you look at 17, Trevor, it's talking about not just ongoing, to attempt to restore the diverted waters back to, it's talking about a specific issue, not a general issue. And that's where a lot of people who read it get tripped up. So this is talking about a specific, it's the existing established stop banks,
Yep.
but it's where a diversion of water has occurred, is the way I'm reading it. And therefore, it's specific to diverted water. It's not
What is
specific.
diverted water?
Well, if a stream was straightened, modified in some way, to change the modification and put it back to what it was, that's what it's talking about, not a general whole of the plan issue. It's specific to that stuff. So, Bruce, Adam, are you thinking I'm wrong or on the same track?
You want to make a comment, then I'll, yeah.
Just so, correct me if I'm wrong, Bruce, are we talking, so the NES freshwater regulations that Trevor's just read out
Yeah.
is work in progress. That's what the government has put out for consultation.
No, the NES is in
No.
place. So it's
It's
been
in
in place
place,
since
yeah.
2020.
2020, that's
20,
the
yeah.
government.
So that's a government regulation.
Yep.
So we can't be any.
So
we
it's
can
in
be more
effect now.
stringent than it, but we
Yes.
can't be less stringent than it at the
Yep.
moment.
Yep. Yep.
That's my interpretation of it.
And so
We can't,
Yeah.
and we can't duplicate it either.
okay.
The issue we have is that some of the rules on the NES are written quite differently from the rules in the regional plan. So it's not always easy to interpret them the same. And we've had a little bit of that when we've been working with our colleagues in Rudd, for example.
But ultimately, the regional plan has to give effect to,
Well, the regional plan will have to give
will have to
effect.
give effect, yes.
Okay.
And one of the things that we're doing at the moment is making sure that alignment is in
Yes.
place. So one of
Okay, so and that's the very issue I think that Robbie was trying to come to,
yeah,
whereas this isn't going to be sorted out around the table.
Yeah.
What's the process of taking this forward? Robbie's offered up a suggestion that he met with Bruce and with Chris McClay, the chief
Yeah.
executive, last week. And it's a matter of getting a specific group of people, landowners, around the table, working directly with Bruce,
yeah. And
taking this forward. And the reality is, Trevor, for your benefit, I have printed the regional plan. I have also printed the current permitted activities as at January 2025 for farmers. Farmers Guide to the Environmental Rules in the Regional Plan. I want to lend this to you so that, as I see you as one of the representatives, to be quite honest, although that's up to the group if we go forward with this. That's what we're working with. That's what we're asking to change. Whatever comes out with the NES, we can't change. That's a government
We're working.
But this is the regional plan. If there's something in here that you want changing, or there's something in here, then let's get it out and get you to work with the rest of the team and say specifically, we want that change to permitted activity, and this is the wording that we want. That's what I'm recommending to you. So in a moment, if that resolution goes through, I'd like to hand that to you to use in helping.
Yeah,
but can we just go to a couple of others? Yep. Matthew and then Brendan.
Well, I'd like to say to Robert that I really liked that idea of yours. I've been on this committee for 10 years, and I've been very disappointed actually in the amount of engagement that we, the farmers, have with Waikato Regional Council staff, and I think it's got to improve. And it's not just well, it's also in the planning of some of the upgrading work that takes place in our drainage district. You know, the council seem to, decide amongst themselves what needs to be done, and we get just presented with their plan and say yes or no. And so I think that we need to have much more engagement with council staff amongst farmers. And I say this particularly so because for a general Waikato Regional Council ratepayer, they may only be paying a few $1,000s a year to the regional council, so it's a minor issue. But when you're talking about targeted ratepayers, some of us are paying $30,000, $50,000, even $100,000 a year, and it's vital to our businesses, and that's why we deserve to have close engagement with the staff when they're planning things.
Yep, no, I understand. Thank you. Right, Brendan.
Can I just add to that for a second, please? Please. I totally understand where you're coming from there, Matthew, and I'd like to think if we have a council that's a bit more in 9 months' time, that's a little bit more willing to work in that area, I would think that we should be fully more engaging before that when the asset is talked about being renewed or upgraded, that community get a lot more input at the start and not once it has started. So I fully support what you said there, but that's for a new council to decide in 9 months' time. So thank you.
It is a new council, but I'm, in all fairness to the staff, and I used to say this to people who used to complain when I was at the court, my staff come to work to do a good job and they don't deliberately set out to do it wrong. Occasionally there's mistakes and I used to kick their ass if they did it second time, but the reality is staff here try to do a good job, and the way in which matters have gone the prior term wasn't conducive to working well together going forward. This committee, which Robbie and I took a lot of bruises over and continue to take the odd bruise along the way, we are working, both of us are going to stand again in the next triennium. If we're successful, I'm not here to seek your support because you can't. The reality. The voting papers out there. Or what? No, the reality is we've got to build on what we're doing. So can we? And we can start. We've already started that in reality with working with Greg and his team. It could do better, but we've got to get a wider support around the council table. And I just want to leave.
Sounds like it's getting political there, Mr. Chair.
Just wanting to leave that alone right now and get on because Bruce's time. He's out of here at 10.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bruce, through the chair, just the version of the regional plan that you're currently looking at, when was that notified?
2012.
Well, no,
1996,
98. Around that time.
Okay, so it's been so this particular clause that.
Can I just clarify that, please?
Mm-hmm.
This version of the regional plan actually became operative in 2007. It was a substantially long environment court process, etc. So I was notified in about 98 and took till 2007 to be made operative.
Mm-hmm. So Bruce, what's your understanding of what an NES does from central government?
Well, it's a national environmental standard for those, so it overrides anything that's in our regional plan unless we're more stringent in it, if it allows us to be. And there are cases where we can't be more stringent than it, for example, with the forestry NES. But we can't be any less stringent than a national environmental standard.
Thank you. That's my understanding. So to Trevor's point, the regional plan has been operative for several years.
Yes.
The current version of the NES FM 2020, that is the current version.
Yep.
Until the current government decides to upgrade that NES. But if that NES specifically gives direction to the point that Trevor's making, I would have thought that it would be a duty of council to modify its regional plan to be no less stringent than what the NES says. And on the particular point of cleaning drains and infrastructure, or the points that Trevor's making, I would suggest that the council needs to, I don't think that's something that council can vote on. I think that's something that the council has to do as a statutory requirement. That would be my understanding of it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're working through in the freshwater policy review, to make sure that all our freshwater policies are in line with central government direction and comply with it. So it's one of the tasks that we're working through our way through at the moment.
So the NES 2020 was probably gazetted in 2021 or somewhere around there, I'd imagine.
Late 2020, same time as the NPS-FM.
So it was 2020.
Yeah, so originally our time frame for having the freshwater policy review publicly notified was 31 December 2024. That got changed last year to 31 December 2027, and the new coalition government did that. So that's the time frame we're working for. It gave us, the council, a chance to relook at the whole freshwater policy review, and we took a paper to council in June last year, and we've made some changes to that project to come up with a fit for Waikato approach to the whole freshwater policy review.
And can I just jump on there?
Yeah.
Just recently, council has appointed 5 councillors, Robbie and I on that group, and we're looking for iwi, which I understand that's you're working on getting. So that group will be ready to go when the government announces what the new FM and
NES.
and NES going forward, so that we are up and running and ready to get into the implementation or what it means.
Yeah, and the first meeting of that committee is on the 4th of March, I understand. Just in the process of preparing papers for it now.
Yeah, I just wonder why it takes so many years for the council to become in alignment with what the government direction is, in particular regard to a national environmental standard, which is actually designed so that regional councils are not more over and above whatever the national environmental standard says.
In order to change our plan, we have to follow the process which is set out in the NPS-FM, and that requires substantial public consultation, substantial engagement with iwi, and also we've been through quite a lot of gathering of technical information to ensure, because it's just not this aspect of fresh water that we're looking at, it's the whole water quality, water quantity, it's a whole lot. It's actually a very complex area of work for policy development.
And there was also a large number of sector groups beginning of last year, I think it was.
Yes.
And of course, with the change of national government, that's flipped it. So that work won't be wasted, but it will have to be reviewed in terms of the of the direction the current government sets. So it's recognised. That's why the deadline passed in 2020, but it gave until the end of 24 to get it, the consultation, the summarised proposal goes out, submissions, hearings, change of plan, whatever. So it takes that time. But believe me, I'm as frustrated as local government being slow, but that's unfortunately the system. Whether we can change it, we can't overnight on our own. So it's a matter of working with the system and within the system to get it sorted. So I'm mindful of you. How much more time have you got with us?
Thank you.
I
Thank you, Mr.
do really
Chair.
need to, go
You do need to
shortly.
cut loose.
Yeah.
So is there anything specific that we need to ask? Okay, Trevor.
Following up from Brandon's comments, I'm left totally confused now. We had a situation at Waikato West where some 4 years ago, all maintenance of board drains was halted because of the NES. Board drains were not allowed to be cleaned out through wetlands because the NES said so, and we lawfully, we had external legal advice and we had internal legal advice that all work stopped until a consent was granted to clean the drain out. And the reason for that was the NES 2020 gazumped everything else. And so am I hearing something wrong where when we want to implement another paragraph of the NES, we can't because it's got to go to 2027. But here's the council implementing a paragraph in the NES 4 years ago to stop cleaning out board drains, and which they changed their mind after 4 years later and cleaned it out. But regardless, one hand, we're saying we cannot implement this clause which says everything can be permitted activity under the NES because it's not written or stamped or God knows what till 2027. On the other hand, 4 years ago, we're coming down to say, you shall stop.
So Trevor, the NES, you've got to give effect to it, I understand, immediately, or as soon as, yeah.
Well, why don't we give effect
And
to
hang
this?
on, what you're talking about was an interpretation that 4 years later was overridden when someone else had a look at it. So that's the NES, and the interpretation which we will accept was an incorrect version. But what you're talking about is the plan. You can't put the plan in the NES. So if you want with the NES, it takes time. Sorry, with the plan, a regional plan, it takes time to get that changed through because of the process we go through. It's set out in statute, whereas the NES comes in and says thou shalt do it.
It seems like you can use it when you want to, and when we want it to use it, you can't.
I understand your frustration.
Exactly the point I'm making, Mr. Chair, and I hope that's not lost on the room, but I think that to push it out to 2027 for one particular clause, it seems rather disingenuous.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chairman, but there's millions of dollars at stake here of tax ratepayers' money getting spent on consents which are totally unnecessary.
Yeah, and that point's been made. So can I just go to Michelle before Bruce leaves? Just pull that down a bit, please, Michelle.
That was, in that instance, that was in an application to apply for a consent. You have to look at the policy framework and the.
Michelle, can you take it close? Sorry.
Sorry, which includes the NES, NPSs. So that's why it looks like it may have been required here and not there, but it's because of application for resource. The whole gambit of policy when you do that.
All right, so Craig, and I'll come back to Brendan.
Surely the intent of the NES should take precedent, as I understand it.
Yep.
And surely there's an obligation for the council to comply with that intent. As I understand, the intent of the NES is that the maintenance of an existing drainage system or flood protection system is just that. It's maintaining the status quo. To not actually do it is actually causing a change to the system. Lack of maintenance actually changes the system and actually heads towards catastrophic disasters when you do get a major event. So I'm wondering if there needs to be some sort of mechanism that short circuits all the bureaucratic process of updating the plan, so that the council has an obligation to be compliant with the intent of the NES.
And look, I think your point's well made. And I know Robbie and I have both said to staff at times, is that, what is the intent? Council seems to have a very risk-averse interpretation of legislation because it cannot break the law. It cannot be seen to break the law. And we've asked for a more liberal interpretation where possible within the bounds of compliance. So, the other issue is we are not the operational, we are governance. We can only make that request. It's over to staff to work within the operational restrictions of legislation.
By my interpretation, the council's procrastination over it is actually running right against the intent of the NES. So they're actually being non-compliant by not actually getting on board with the NES as quickly and as reasonably as possible.
I think everybody in the room's hearing that. So, Brendan.
I think the point's probably well made. I just think that I think that the CE should be taking the initiative here. This should not be a democratic thing. This is actually, it's actually set in statute by the government that you will not exceed this. It's what the NES actually says. You will not exceed this. You will go to this standard, but you cannot exceed it. Regional councils are not allowed to be more stringent than what the NES lays out, no matter whatever that clause happens to be on. But on permitted activity status for cleaning of essential drainage and flood protection structures, that should actually be, it shouldn't have to go through a consenting process. That policy should be reversed forthwith after the NES 2020 was when it stated that. That's my understanding of how an NES works, but perhaps there should be a legal opinion sought on that.
The legal opinion hasn't been beneficial. And look, and just in the Chief Executive's defence, when we took the issue of Lake Waikiri to the Chief Executive, because of his background in the resource use unit, he made the decision to have another look at it, and it was through his intervention that it was overturned. He and I and Robbie, we've met several times. The latest one that I had with him was on the permitted activities, and he gets what you're asking for. He gets what you're asking for, but the issue is he's got a big business here to run. This is going to take some time to work through. He's got Bruce and his team working on the changes to the regional plan. We are all frustrated that the government has not kept up with their promised timeline of legislation changes, massive undertakings that they took on. That is coming, and we're in a bit of a limbo, and I'm frustrated as you are because we can't help you with the future direction until we actually know. We've got a good guess because the ministers have been talking about what they're going to do and what they're not going to do. But when it comes down to putting it in an NES or legislation, that's when it starts to get difficult, how to capture that without leaving open for misinterpretation, such as the NES in Lake Waikiri. So I want to wrap this up a little bit because I know Bruce is going. Just a question before you go, Bruce. Yeah. Are you happy with the suggestion of having a specific stakeholder, a landowner group that you will continue to look? I believe you've been open and the council has been open and willing to listen to the landowners, but so excuse me, a specific group?
Yeah, we're more than happy to work with any group that wants us to, because part of our job is to consult with the community and to work with key stakeholders. So there'll be a range of stakeholders that we're working with. So yes, we're happy to.
Can I have one last comment and then we move on?
Yeah. Well,
I believe that the leadership is lacking. I believe that it's a change of attitude, not a change of rules and regulations. I believe after reading this since Waikiri West over 4 years and everything else is council can interpret the rules as they wish. And I want them to interpret it in favour of the targeted ratepayer. And you proved that the only two people in this world can break the law by the sound of it after Waikiri West. One is an ecologist and the other is Donald Trump. But, you know,
Let's
we
not
had
go
all
there,
these
please.
legal opinions, and then an ecologist is now breaking the law by saying, go and clean the bloody drain.
No, He's not. He's not.
But we were drummed into, we were breaking the law. But anyway, regardless, I believe it's an attitude of the council needs to change, not the rules.
And if you heard me before, Trevor, we have asked and, you know, we've for a more liberal interpretation whilst council must remain within the law. So,
That can happen tomorrow. That can happen tomorrow,
and
not 2027.
I don't know, Robbie, but I sense since coming in here in, when it was October 22, there has been change. It's not probably as much as you and I would like, Trevor.
Yep.
But it's like trying to overturn a mountain at times.
Well,
So
it's millions of dollars of ratepayers' money going.
except that, Craig, I'd like to close this off unless it's fine.
I'd just like to say, we continuously ask for a different lens to be looked at. That's what we ask for. We ask for staff, please look at in a different lens all the time. Is that right? That's what
Mr.
we
Chair,
ask.
can I make one more,
Well,
I'll ask one more question to Bruce. So Bruce, in your opinion, or maybe it's not your opinion, but is Waikato Regional Council enforcing rules that are over and above what the NES currently requires?
it's not his role.
It's not my role. I can't speak to that. It's an enforcement.
That's a different part of the
question.
business.
From the best off, I'm directing that to the Director of Resource Use. Yeah.
He's not at our beck and call, but we can ask politely. But
Well, I think you're asking the wrong question. It's not about asking council to work with the community. What the community is saying, the NES is set out by the government, and the regional councils can be no more stringent than what the NES says. On
Agreed.
this particular point, the council is taking a stronger approach than what the NES allows for. And that is the problem. So it's nothing to do with it's nothing to do with your interaction with us, because I actually think I think your team works very proactively with this table here and with the community. I don't think that's the issue. The issue is the CE needs to make sure that his council, your council, our council is doing no more than what it's required to do under the NES. And I think that you are, and I think it seems crazy that it takes another 7 years to get up to date with it, because by the time you get up to date with it, there'll be another version of an NES on the table. And then what do? Do you take another 7 years to get compliant with it?
yeah, and just remember that it's not the council that sets the time frames. When the NESs come out, it's the government. So, all right. Well, yeah. Yeah, I just don't think we should get into the habit of demanding staff run down at our beck and call. It's not. Yeah, we'll ask politely, but okay. Bruce, if you need to go.
Okay.
I want Adam to have a say, and then if there's any resolution that we need to make, and but you've indicated your willingness, and I thank you for that, and thank you for coming down.
Happy to help. Yep.
Yep, and great to work with. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. And just before you shoot off, Bruce, just want to acknowledge that your support and your attendance today. Know that, there is a process in place here. We have to follow through. There is a lot to unpick here, but just from a staff perspective, I will follow through with the action that's been tabled today. I'll work with Bruce to make sure that there is engagement with the committee and some of the matters that have been tabled today to work those through, and we'll provide, feedback through the process going forward for the committee. But there is a process. Council is aware of that. Sometimes it takes time to get to the place we need to be. Bruce, acknowledge that. And so we'll make sure that we plan out this and so everyone's on the same page. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruce.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
And just before we go to, is there anyone that wants to propose a resolution at all on this matter? Or are we satisfied that there is enough undertaking to engage? Brendan,
I think we need some sort of resolution around what Brandon said. I'm not sure of the words to say that. Can somebody come up with the words that exactly what Brandon said? Can you think of any?
well, I'm happy for it to, I can just suspend this item and in the break, allow you guys to come up
Okay.
with the words.
Yep.
And come back to the item.
Thank you.
All right, rather than
Just yes.
doing a.
So a suggestion is, rather than try and resolve it today, that for the next meeting, that we actually have an answer from Brett Sinclair and the team around council being in line and no more stringent than what the National Environmental Standard requires.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't take a change in the regional plan of another 2 years from now to resolve that. It needs to be, maybe the structure of the regional plan needs looking at so it can be reviewed reasonably efficiently.
So I've got it for you guys. If you want to look at it, you've got to deal with it. You know, you've got to know what's in it and you've got to tell us exactly what you want changed. I'm sorry, but you know, like.
That's not our job, that's your job, that's why you're the councillor.
You've got to tell me what you want changed, and the easiest way is go, it's, you know, rules such and such, subparagraph, blah, blah, blah. That's wrong. We would like to see this.
No, what we're saying is the council should be no more stringent than what the National Environmental Standard requires, because that's what the government law says and Local Government Act says. Simple as that.
I'm not going to argue with you on that. Absolutely agreed. So, all right.
We'll sort
You'll
something.
work something out. All right. I'm going to suspend this item and we'll come back to it.
Mr. Chairman, can I just clarify that a little bit further, that with any resolution being made will be escalated, and I'm just, from a staff's perspective, just making sure that we are, you know, we have taken away an agreement to act on this, and will provide, and I, Robbie, you've tabled an action at the start of the meeting. A resolution is more formal. That's up to, I guess, the chair to decide on that. But we have made a commitment that we will work through an existing process that Bruce has outlined today, bearing in mind we don't want to set up a parallel process, Mr. Chairman.
Can I just add to that? I think if we could ask for a membership of 3 members and then the hierarchy, we could ask for 3 members to do a stakeholder, and then they could engage with both the RUD team and the strategy and policy team in that engagement on behalf of both committees. Of what? That'd be a better way of doing it? No, I'm asking.
Yeah, look, I think we take it offline and talk about it in the break and come back. And, now, Tipper, you're online. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, go for it.
Just suggestion that the suite of actions required to give effect to the conversation be outlined by staff so we know what can be achieved towards the end of this triennium and residual actions for the remaining term. It's going to require a set of decisions and a pathway. Why don't we discharge staff to go and do that so we can all get up and over that? I mean, you can resolve all you want to and we'll end up wasting time on whether we can do the resolution or we can just name the actions with the assistance of staff that need to take place to give effect to, again, how to bring the NES and the rules closer together and what will be achieved this term. Because I think that's the urgency I hear. How far will we get? What are the subsequent steps and who's responsible? If staff can come back with that report by the next meeting and the actions that we can take, we'll stop chasing white rabbits, gentlemen. So kia ora.
Thank you. Good points, Tipper. All right, so we're going to suspend that item and we'll bring it back later. So we can go back to the order in the agenda and deal with apologies. So we have Maxine Van Oosten, Hamilton City Council. Are there any further apologies? There have been no further apologies. Can I have a mover? Thanks, Robbie and Campbell. All in favour? Carried. And so what have we got next? Confirmation of the agenda. Yeah, so it's been changed to meet the needs, so I'll move that. Any second? Thank you, Craig. All in favour? Against? Carried. Now, just noting, I'll do disclosure of interest first. Is there anyone that's got any disclosures other than what they've already disclosed? No. We'll move on. Minutes for confirmation. All right, so that's on page 8. Is there any matters arising from those minutes? No matters. All the items will be dealt with that arise from that will be under the actions that will come, I think, next. So, Trevor, you moving the minutes?
Yeah, I can do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, Robbie. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Chair's report. So I might have to amend some of this because I've already talked about some of it. Staff worry about this because I don't give it to them in writing and they wonder what I'm going to say. So look, just won't go into full detail, but there's been many meetings with the landowners, either at Waikato Regional Council or on farm. They've been great engagements, and I thank those who have come forward with the various ideas. Permitted activities, we're dealing with that now, and we'll come back to it later in the meeting. So I talk about earlier to the group that wants change, you really do need to be a little bit more specific what changes, rather than just saying everything we need to be made permitted activities. There will be certain reasons that staff and even myself may put up and say, well, guys, is this really going too far? Is it a consent, but if we limit the consent to restricted, discretionary or discretionary rather than the higher levels of non-complying and the likes? So I'm going to invite Trevor, if you're interested in being part of that, to take these documents, unless you've already got a copy yourself. I do want it back, but I don't mind it being a bit soiled. I'll know whether you've used it. Just a quick update on the annual plan. We met with staff on Monday and have come up with a proposal that will come out later for consultation. There's nothing significant, I believe, in there for rivers and R&D. Oh, sorry, I'm coming to that. Yeah, I'm coming to that. It's a separate item that you would expect. There is issues on the buses, which will incur a rate to, for those in the Waikato district, which I think most of us come from. There will be rates that per property as opposed to capital values. And I don't think anything is higher than $67, depending if you're in a town, to down to $10 something if you're out at, say, Tiakau or somewhere like that, contributing to the overall cost of running the bus services. So please let us know what you think of that. So coming to the point that Robbie's raised, Pamela and Robbie moved a resolution that staff bring back to the final discussions in relation to the annual plan, a look at what opportunities there might be for research and development in the ICM space, and what opportunities and possibly what sort of money we might be needing to put into that space. So that we are putting that in the consultation document, Pamela. Sorry, are we putting that in? Just it's so fresh, I can't remember. The R&D. So we've asked staff to do that, but are we putting it in the consultation document?
So we've asked staff to put together some thinking around a budget for R&D in the flood protection and control. And so that will come back to us as part of the CE's submission. for consideration in the annual plan.
But are we mentioning it in the consultation document that that's
I
what we're
don't
doing?
know, not in the consultation
Okay.
document.
If you've got any thoughts on that, don't be afraid to feed them in through the Pamela, myself, Robbie. That will help us in our thoughts. So Bruce and Tracy, so that's all that I've got at the moment. And I'll move that verbal report. Robbie, seconds that. All in favour? Against? Carried. Okay. Next item on the list is what? The issues and actions, page 18.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will run that through. Members, this paper here just captures the issues and actions from the last meeting. I will take the paper as read, but just wanted to draw your attention to a couple of resolutions that the committee agreed to present to the ICMC meeting last year. And you'll see those presented in the report there. So the first one being there was a request that the landowners be involved in some of the peat work that councils have been underway for some time. So there's an offer there from our science manager, Mike Scarsbrook, to come and provide an informational paper to the committee around the work that council's done on peat. The last 3 LTPs, there has been a lot more, money put into the peat research side of things, and it is obviously very important aspect that for this subcommittee. So we're just making note that we've actually had a discussion there with the science manager, and he's happy to. If that's desirable for the committee, we can bring a report back at a later time.
Any comment on that? No, we go to the next one.
Cool. The next one, Mr. Chairman, is just around the position of council in respect to land use, and so there's a couple of references there made where land use is quite paramount and is obviously quite an important consideration for council through the regional policy statement, the regional plan, coastal plan, the climate change response position statement, and the climate action roadmap as well. And all those documents are available on our website for members' perusal.
Have you jumped ahead?
Oh, have it. Taking those ones as read.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just on the following page.
Yep.
And the last resolution, Mr. Chairman, that went up to the ICMC was around the mission statement for ICM, Integrated Catchment Management, and just a note there in the paper that the vision and purpose of the Integrated Catchment Management Directorate mirrors the same as the Waikato Regional Council, which you see there is the mighty Waikato, caring for our place, empowering our people. There's a purpose statement there too, and just a note that the vision and purpose of the Regional Council is reviewed every 3 years as part of the triennial election, which is obviously later this year, and also forms part of the review of the strategic direction that Council undertakes upon the commencement of each new triennium as well. And I'm sure there's opportunities there for feedback, Mr. Chairman, through that. So I'll leave it there and happy to take any questions for clarification.
Just on that issue, the council laws had an in-house public excluded discussion, so I won't go into any great detail, but what I will say is that the issue of the strategic direction of council was discussed last week, and I believe the group of councillors that we have now, should the majority of those be returned, have a better understanding of what that strategic direction and how it really is that important that we need to seriously look at it in greater depth and what the consequences of that strategic direction is. So it was a very good workshop, and I think it helped us understand where we could have done better. Well, I'll say that I could have done better on that subject. But I won't breach the confidence of the day. But I think in relation to the strategic direction, there will be an attempt by the next council to look at that in greater depth than it. We thought we did it pretty well, but I think we could do better. So I'll leave it at that, and we'll take no questions on that comment. So, all right. Is it questions, Matthew? So what item? What- Oh, that's, sorry, yep.
Thank you, Matthew.
In the Mangataffri cost benefit analysis, the economist that did that said that $1 million worth of dairy output from a dairy farm results in $5.7 million worth of economic activity in the community. And I was at a meeting yesterday where it was stated that in the Lake Waikato area, Waikato Regional Council rules are making dairy farms, putting people off dairy farming, and people are going out of dairy farming into less intensive industries. And I just want to make the comment that $1 million worth of dairy income gives $5.7 million economic activity in the area. The reverse is true. If you take a dairy farm out of production and say $1 million worth of dairy production out of production, you're getting $5.7 million less economic activity in the Waikato. And so, in my view, a lot of Waikato Regional Council policies are not resulting in a strong economy; they're resulting in a weaker economy.
I understand what you're saying, but I really want to see the specifics of that, Matthew. How many farms have actually stopped? Because once they're gone, they're gone. So how many have actually stopped in the Whangamarino area? How
I don't
many?
know for sure.
In the Matahura Valley catchment of the Lake Waikere, 50% of the dairy farms have gone out of that, or to a lower extent, they've gone out to dry stock or changed land use because of just the rules and regulations and the compliance costs of it. So there's a huge cost there. Just up my road, there used to be 11 dairy farms. There's only 2 dairy farms now. If you go up to Manga,
And what sort of period is that?
that's over the last maybe 10 years. So, and then you look at up the Mangatangi catchment up that way, there's only, there's not, I'm not certain how many, but there's a lot of dairy farms gone out of that catchment and into lifestyle blocks because it's, they're just finding it's just too hard to be there. So, yeah.
And having the numbers gives the context. So thanks for that.
We can supply you the numbers. I can get the numbers for you.
No. I think the point's been well made. So, you made the point about the economics of certain areas within your catchment there being less than and you've tied that to the regional council rules. So, is there anything wrong with the purpose, or is what are you actually asking, or are you just actually giving?
I don't think that a lot of the, sorry, I don't think that a lot of the people in the Waikato Regional Council have enough economic knowledge to realise, the damage they're causing to the Waikato economy. And I was giving the figures because, like, for example, later on in your report, you talk about the GDP of the Waikato, of the GDP of the drainage district in the Waikato.
Yep.
And what a large amount of, a large percentage of the Waikato economy is the GDP, but it doesn't take any, I think you need to emphasize, and people need to be educated that, an industry that exports is like a snowball that generates a lot of activity. It's not just limited to the GDP of that particular business. It's the snowball, the multiplier effect of export industries. And I think a lot of decisions are being made in the Waikato Regional Council in ignorance of the importance of export industries.
It's noted. Thank you.
I know, I can understand where you're coming from with that, Matthew, but actually every meeting I've been, your drainage manager that's sitting just across the table there, Ruben, I've been very impressed when we've had external people here talking about drainage, and he definitely beats the table of how much economic development the drainage schemes does to the Waikato region. I've never heard another staffer to bang that as hard as Ruben does. So,
Good on you.
no, would that be true, Noel?
It's a very significant issue. I think about 7% of the area of the region's drained, and 27% of the GDP comes from that 7% of the area. So it's hugely significant production from that land that's drained.
But it's not just limited to that 27%.
Appreciate
Point
that.
I'm trying to make.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Craig?
I think the operational side of the council is very much aware of that because they're actually rubbing shoulders with the people that are actually generating the wealth. It's perhaps the regulatory side
Yes.
of the bureaucracy in general that perhaps needs to be more in line with the operational.
And then that's the exact reason why I'm asking for that stakeholder group to have that representation, that you talk to them, that side of council. That's where you need to put it.
Peter?
Yeah, I look at, and I agree that the economic drivers at the present time is, but when I look at plan change one that's coming out and land use change.
You had to mention that, didn't you?
Yeah, and you look at like the growers that have had growing, that have been growing crops and now in the plan change one area, now they've actually gone. So therefore the economy is actually coming back a little bit because of the value of what growers have in there. It's like I see going into Tikawara, Bull Brothers used to have a huge crop there with potatoes and vegetables. And now that's gone. It's just gone into maize, and you can't go back. You can't put it back into there because of change one. So to me, I think there's going to be a drop in the economy in these particular areas because of some of the rules that we've got. So we've got to be aware that it's going to sort of come back, even though these drainage areas are working really well, but it's not going to carry on producing what we used to produce because of the plan change one.
And look, Peter, I've got a hell of a lot of sympathy for those comments, and particularly the likes of the growers, because if we've got a population, when I was a young person, we had 2.5 million in this country. We've got apparently 5 million and a few more million overseas if they want to come back. How do you feed those people? You've got to have crops that you put all sorts of things in to make them grow and more of them. I'm not trying to tell Brandon how to do his job. The reality is you've got to have probably more land, if you double your population. But does LPC1 allow for that? Those are the questions that I have as a landowner and as a councillor. And once it's released by the Environment Court, we need to have another look at it and say, what have we learned since those rules became effective? And what have we learned? What of the downside of that? And how do we go about changing it so there's a balance? We've got external people saying, you've got to do this, you're killing the land, you're doing this, this and this. On the other hand, they want feeding, but they're not considering how they get their food and what needs to be done to get it to them. So I think, I'm waiting there to see what that comes out as, and then let's start the conversation out. We've got 10 years of experience as to what those implications have been, and what do we need to sort of meet in the middle ground there. So I'll watch this space if I'm still here. So.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to commend the Waikato Regional Council in setting up a committee called the Response Committee for Lake Waikere Whangamarino. And we had a meeting with the landowners yesterday, and we put forward some responses that hopefully will clean up, what we think would help clean up the Lake Waikere and Whangamarino catchment. It's a process that we're going through. If we get the response that we think we're going to get out of that, we would like to see that sort of come out of, be put into the next regional plan or something to alter that, because of plan change one. This might result in the fact that we are cleaning up the river, cleaning up the wetland and the Whangamarino and every other catchment because of this response committee that you've put up. And, with the landowners that we've got and the other members of that committee, I hope that we actually come up with a really good plan, come to the council so we can actually drive what you say, get back out there and drive the economy.
Yeah, I'm pleased. I knew that meeting was about to take place. And just as a slight digression here, the council has set up a Whangamarino Waikiri wetland restoration group encompassing a lot of people, and some of us are in the room here. The idea is to draw up the plan or a suggested plan to go forward, not to actually do the work, but to actually set the plan up as what needs to be done. And then in the next long-term plan, the council will look at those options because it's due to be, I think, June 2026, middle of next year. And that will be around the time of the 27th, the next long-term plan, I think it is. Yes, so that will give time to develop the funding solutions to start the journey on the restoration. So I think Bruce was in that meeting yesterday, was he? Of the landowners only?
We had a meeting with Tracy Nelson and
Yep, that's right. She's leading the that discussion with landowners, isn't
yes.
she? Yeah, so that's feeding into that. So at some stage, we'll get a report just to come across. There's a number of different parts. You can see, I don't want to see silos and doing things, but we'll get a briefing once it develops the plan sort of in its infancy. And once we get some sort of clarity where it's going, we'll bring that as an information only document to you. So, all right. General issues and action. So I'll move that it's received. So 1 second that, thank Peter. Thank you. All in favour? Against, carried. All right. We've got to get onto the meaty stuff soon. Right. Work program. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is our usual work program report, just providing an update on our operational and capital work program for the period July through to December. But I think we also include some of the more recent work undertaken in early 25. Just wish to apologise to members, but as part of the agenda that went out, a couple of incorrect attachments went out. So I've handed out some hard copies that you'll find on your desk. So this replaces page 38 and page 47. I think I've got the page numbers right, Jordan, in your paper. And we'll send those out corrected with the minutes, just so everyone has a copy of those. And Brendan, but the staff will work through some highlights on those documents shortly. So yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll hand over to Brendan. Just by way of introduction, Brendan is our acting zone manager. Many of you remember Sarah Leland departed us last October for a key role down in Taupo as their Three Waters manager. So we're very grateful for Brendan to step in and I guess fulfill the role in the meantime. And he's doing a great job, I might add. And and I really appreciate the landowner support and understanding for Brendan at this time as well, because it is a new role. And I think he's, I almost say he might smile the odd time that he's enjoying it, hey, Brendan? But, and also Reuben Mills, our land drainage manager, and many of you will know, and Reuben will cover the land drainage aspects of this report. So I'll hand over to Brendan now, Mr. Chairman, and just run through some highlights. Thank you.
So we'll take the report as read, Brendan.
Yep. I think this is working. Yeah, I was just going to take the report as read. I had a couple of points on the slides, but yeah. There's the bulk of the reports and the attachments that were incorrect. So I guess the thinking is to go through a couple of those attachments and just highlight mainly the capital works attachment. But if we just run through the slides quickly, I guess the first couple of points are really just that the program's in full swing. Key tasks are underway with a lot of key projects about to start. And I guess when we look at the budgets, we're tracking reasonably okay for end of December. I think flood protection looks 46% spent. And I think that's not too bad. So, yeah, I guess as a whole, we're on track. We've got a lot of work in progress. And yeah, I guess that's essentially it. I don't know if there's any questions on the budget or not, but I put the budget table in to just kind of outline where we're spending and how we're tracking. The bulk of the works is in the flood protection budgets. So yeah, I think we're doing all right.
Is there anything that you'd like to highlight?
I guess the capital budget, I was keen to highlight some areas in the capital budget. It shows we're only 13% spent. So, I mean, you could look at that and go into December, 13% spent. That's probably not where we need to be. But I wanted to highlight that there's a lot of major capital projects about to start with a rather large portion of that budget allocated to them. So,
and will that be brought to charge in this term? Like they'll be completed and brought to charge, so there's no carryovers?
but yeah, that's the plan. The plan is to have it all allocated this financial year, but there might be slight carryovers with retentions and stuff from capital projects. But the intent is that we're starting a couple of big jobs. The Lower Waikato Stop Bank job, which is a large portion of the budget, that's looking to commence very shortly. And the bulk of the cost will sit within this financial year for that. And Mangatawhiri Compartment 3 is another large project within the region, which is about to commence as well. So, well, the plan is that the bulk of the money you'll see hit this financial year. Yeah.
Any questions up to this point? No, carry on.
Okay, so I guess the next thing probably to go through is, I think there's a slide on the vessel project. So I guess the messaging here really is that we're into the final fit out of the vessel. There's a couple of blessings to take place, and we're slowly getting there. We're a bit behind on time. I think that's been the messaging for the last couple of meetings. Yeah, so I guess that's all I've really got to update on the vessel.
I'm not sure if we mentioned this previously, but there was an issue with the vessel. It got a little bit of pitting, rusting, whatever, on the surface. And the person that the council has employed as the project manager for council rejected the surface, and it had to be completely, it was mainly external area, if I remember. Thanks, Greg. And it took several weeks to have it brought up to a near perfect surface for the painting and the likes. And that slowed it down. And of course, it was due to be with us around about what would have been here now had it been on target. But we can't bring it up the river to where the mooring is at this stage because of the river so low. And the sea trials will be happening. Well, that won't be very far away. So I think it's about April, the handover date, give or take. Maybe Greg, you could just help me out because you've been up to have a look at it yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So we're currently working towards having the vessel delivered to the Waikato Regional Council by the end of the financial year, so end of June. We've just received an updated program from the vessel manufacturers. I'll actually be heading up there at the end of today to inspect the vessel tomorrow morning with our project manager and to meet with their general manager to get an overview of the next few months, which are critical to getting the vessel completed, trialled, and ultimately delivered to ourselves.
And my understanding is that we've got a fixed price contract, so these delays are on the builder.
Correct.
So it seems to be a good contract. So looking forward to that arriving in the area to get to work. But we do have an alternative. If the river's not high enough to come right up, it can be temporarily moored I thought it was Turkey.
Yeah, the team, we're considering some alternative sites. If we were to need to bring it up in the lower river conditions, there's some work that can be done in the lower reaches as well.
So it will be with us, and you'll all be given an opportunity at some stage to have a look at it, I'm sure. So, okay, carry on.
The only other thing I was going to go through is, because you guys haven't had the attachment to read, I was just going to highlight a couple of those key projects.
Before you do, Trevor, did you have a question on the vessel?
Yes, sticking to my normal thing, is there a budget for the two blessings? What is it?
It doesn't come out of river and drainage, I believe.
Doesn't matter. How much?
I don't know. The man behind you. Greg.
So there is a budget that's part of the project. I can bring some further information back to the committee if there is an interest in those two, but it is certainly an integral part of the project.
We had a small pump placed up at Sid's area, and it cost $8,000 for the blessing. And there was a lot of controversy over that. And I just I don't care where the money comes from. It's either coming from a taxpayer or the ratepayer.
Your point's been made, and it's been made previously. Council, there are certain members on council who are mindful of the costs of this type of activity. It is something that is part of the regional council policy. I'm not defending it. I'm not against it. All I'm taking is a neutral line here. It is current policy, and if that is to be changed, someone needs to raise that. But at the moment, that's our policy. But staff are very aware that there's a number around the table that are very sensitive to expenditure in this area.
I'd still like a meeting for the cost of both those blessings to be tabled, please, just to make people aware of what's going on.
That's a fair question. Thank you. All right. Sorry, your next point.
Yeah, I was just gonna, if people would like me to, I could just touch on a couple of key projects for the Lower Waikato that are either underway or coming up. So, some of the big stuff on this program is the Island Block pump station replacement project. So we've had a couple of good landowner meetings, one before Christmas, which was pretty successful. And we had a walkover in January. So I guess that project's back on track. We've re-engaged the consultants to start designing and get the consenting underway for that project. So that's a bit of good news. We're looking to have a significant spend in that project this financial year. And hopefully be able to give you more feedback at the following committee meeting. So that's a good progress update. The other one really here, the other big one here is really the stop bank renewals down the bottom, which I touched on. That's about to commence in the next couple of weeks, and that will take a couple of months to complete. The other points of interest really here are Mangatawhiri Compartment 2 pump station. So we're about to start a process of investigating what really needs to be done there. And the intent is to go meet with the landowners sooner than later to get feedback on what they feel needs to be done or what the issues are on the ground, just to make sure we've got the right issues and we've understood what we think is right. We just want to double check it with the landowners and get their feedback. So that's going to happen before we get too far down the path of optioneering. And then we'll have a number of landowner meetings throughout that project. So very similar to what we did to Island Block. It worked well for Island Block, worked well for Churchill, and we're going to roll it out for Mangatawhiri as well.
So just looking at Churchill, that had a budget of 7.5 million, is still on track to come in at 6. So what are the learnings from that, and how do you think they can be applied to these other projects, or how will they?
Good question. Maybe I can come back with that, but I think some of the learnings are probably better just to come back with some better learnings on that.
Mr. Chairman.
We had project management on that job.
Greg?
Yeah, one thing I can share is if you're referencing the cost savings that were achieved, primarily that was because we had a contingency for some unforeseen ground conditions at the site. We were fortunate that they didn't pan out as we may have expected, and so we had achieved some cost savings in that regard.
You anticipated something that didn't actually eventuate, so, okay. Yeah, Mike?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm just asking the question, with the $1 million plus saving, is that now money that's not going to be charged against the landowners up there?
Yep. So that's
So the suggested rate increase won't be anywhere near as bad as envisaged. That's right. Thank you.
Is that a win?
Yes, that is a win. Yep.
All right, I'll go to Will and then I'll come to Robbie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brendan, just a quick question on the stock bank. Is that being sourced locally, the fill to upgrade the stock banks?
Yeah, that's a good question. The source is locally, yeah.
So on the farm or?
Oh, sorry, that local, yeah, not on the farms. We're still tying down exact sources, but there's a couple of sources we mentioned in there within the Pocono Tuakau area, but not on farm, no. And we've staged, so stages two, the Lower Waikato stock bank program has been split into two stages. First stage is just Oni Whero and Tuakau East. Originally, it was going to incorporate Tikahonga stop banks. We pulled that back to go into stage 2 to work through material sourcing, design question, and then look to tender that shortly. So, well, I say shortly, midway through the year. So, yeah, that's where we're at with the stop banks.
Thank you, Robbie.
Yeah, Brendan, I'm just wondering when you do that report, and it's a little report, but if it actually states which project has got deluge funding or not.
Okay.
I think that might be important to show that what we actually do get from central government to help with these projects to proceed would be a good point.
Just on that point, I think, is it 12 million, Greg, that we're getting? So that's, yeah, that's 12 million less that the council will be borrowing to, you know, go on our overall budgets, etc. So it is helpful.
Yeah.
The sad thing is I learned depreciation will still be applied to that 12 million, although it was paid from someone else.
And I guess those are some of the key drivers to this capital program, like, you know, the Lower Waikato Stop Bank. The reason we scaled that down and we've got those 2 banks across the line is we've got a lot of funding from Kanoa funding for that. So we want to secure that, and hence we want to get underway shortly.
And
those are time bound, aren't they? They have to be
time bound. Yes,
yeah.
Island Block's the same. So we are under a bit of time pressure on delivering that, and that's well understood. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, if you were to go through these projects and put a traffic light on them, which ones would be green, which ones would be orange, and which ones would be?
In terms of risk?
Yeah.
In terms of risk, I would say the stop banks and Mangatawhiri 3 is where we're putting our focus at the moment.
So is there any reds there?
Not at this stage.
Orange?
There's a few oranges, yeah.
Do
A lot of greens.
Do you want to know
greens.
more? Or? Yeah.
Does that answer the question? There obviously, you know, it's pretty clear that we're getting into, you know, March, and some of the jobs are just starting to get underway. Those are the oranges, I suppose. The greens would be the stuff that there's some on there we've completed, some well underway, like the Mangawara floodgate program that's well underway. That'd be your greens, and then at this stage, there's probably no reds here, apart from maybe Vessel if you're going to mark it as a red.
Yeah. Just something to look forward to in a report in the future.
Perhaps you could look at that. We receive other reports in council that have the traffic lights on them. So perhaps could you just look at that and visually you can pick it up straight away.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we've made some, in Brendan's introductory comments and on the slides, we've made some, you know, general comments like programs on track, budget expended, but we can definitely add some traffic lighting to the reports for the future. So we'll take that on board.
Thank you. All right, Peter.
The Island Block scheme, I'm not against what we're doing. Just a question, it's been funded over 80 years. You know, what's the difference in how much money goes out if we did it over 30 years? You know, why is the difference? Because normally because the money that we'd actually pay in interest could be a lot more by funding over 80 years and not over.
The reason we've done it over 80 years is to align with the regional asset management plan. So there will be portions of that project that are depreciated over shorter terms because the life of that specific asset is shorter. But we've done, for the likes of the landowner meetings, we did 80 years just to kind of keep it simple. We know that at 80 years, the rate increase is significant. If we were to bring that back down to 30 years, I'm not sure how the landowners would feel. We know at 80 years, you know, we've had a lot of landowner meetings to work through that budget, and it's tight. Yeah.
You've touched on a very sensitive issue for me, because let's look at Churchill East. That's been completed at 6 million. So that gets depreciated over 3 years, and then there's a revaluation. And if we've maintained it properly, current price valuation might be 10 million. And so we change the depreciation from the 6 million to the 10 million. And then we go back in 3 years' time, and has it hit 15 million? And I know I've been extreme here. So I've got a real concern about the depreciation model, which is mandated by central government. It is not the choice of this council. And so we, well, I know I'm asking serious questions about this, and we need to address, but it's a matter of working out what might be the alternative. So it's a serious concern, and one of the reasons why I think our budgets are going through the roof at times, long term. When you look at the graph that came out about 2 years ago, they had costs of ICM, and then it just goes up like that. You know, at some stage, depreciation is going to kill the situation. But anyway, you just touched a raw nerve for me there, Peter. And I'm not paying for a flood pump or otherwise, but I empathise with you.
I know we had the meeting and we agreed to it, but I just wanted to know the clarification why, you know.
So it's the life of the asset, and that's currently 80 years in the asset management plan, I believe. So, Robbie. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And why Pamela misses the-
Just concurring with your point there around the whole depreciation model, it is severely broken. The model is not financially sustainable for anybody, and you know it really makes us question why these assets are currently funded the way they are, and it also probably points to a far more logical model would be to privatise these schemes, or to go to some sort of like a drainage board scheme where it's run completely separate, maybe as like ICM as part of council, and the work, I'll make the point, ICM do very good work, but I think to your point, the frustration is the way the government supposedly enforces council to do it this way, or councils to do it this way. It doesn't make any financial sense at all. Like anyone in private business, if you buy something like that in 20 years' time, it's depreciated down to nearly zero. You don't revalue it at a much higher level. So the whole thing's crazy. But in my view, we need to be seriously challenging the status quo. And I'm not sure whether, I guess at this table, we need to be doing that.
Yeah, I think like the point I made a moment ago was, what is the alternative? And I think from what I understand of the situation was that a number of councils weren't providing for an ability to replace. And so the solution was to force councils to depreciate and the revaluation. And so I think the negative effects are truly being seen now. And is it right to continue? So we're a little bit off track, I know, but it's a good point, but it's not lost. But I'm looking for what the solution is, because I know you and we depreciate, it goes to zero. We either have the money there to buy the new asset, or we borrow some money and pay it off. What the argument is, if you depreciate it, you're providing for it on a loan anyway. So some people rationalise it as the same as what we do on the farm, but it's not really, because we don't revalue it.
Well, if the model is correct, if we look at the example of Motokaraka Pump Station, what it cost to build in the first part 1967, the subsequent part commissioned 74, there should actually be enough money in the kitty to pay for it now. If what we're saying, if this model actually works, and yet I don't think it tells us that, because for the whatever that pump station may cost when it comes to be replaced, let's just say it's $10 to $12 million, or could even be 15 million. We don't even know. We've got no idea yet. But is that money in the pot there ready to go? Because if the model is working as it supposedly works, that money should be there, and I don't think it is.
I don't think it is either. So, all right, Robbie, just want to move this on to drainage.
Yep. You got it. All I'd like to say is to that is, I see Matthew has sent out an email saying that Chris Bishop may be turning up at compartment 3 or something. I heard.
No. From the email that he sent to me, which I shared with you, was that you've spoken to Andrew. He's written to Chris Bishop. Chris Bishop is interested in the issue, and we're waiting to see what happens. And one of the options was that he turns up, maybe. But
in that discussion, I think that's the point, that discussion needs to go to Chris Bishop, because we need a different way, and we can't change it sitting here. We need us and councillors and support from Pamela to go, this needs a different spotlight put on here, because this way is unaffordable. And so when you're having that discussion, I hope you include us in it, because we need to be there trying to get something different done. And that's all I'm saying. So, yeah, thank you.
All right, that's all from,
I just had a couple of photos, but we can
okay,
quickly
yeah,
flick
yeah,
through
no,
those.
go
Just
for it and then we'll get
pretty
to
minor.
drainage.
Yeah, it's just floodgate works in the Mangawara, so I just wanted to highlight we've changed design to go to precast units of Hines, and it's working real well. It's saving a lot of money. I think we did that bottom job for 68,000, where usually had 120 grand program for 4-inch stitchery. So we've trialled a number of floodgates, just pretty much using catalogue products out of Hines, and it seems to be working pretty well. So just wanted to highlight that.
So they bought that on site, did you say?
We brought that precast unit off Hines and then poured the middle in there, but originally we had a design to pour the whole lot in stitchery. And we've decided to trial this out, and it seems to be working well for the Mangawara, which is good cost savings for the future, maybe. Yeah.
Carry on.
Yeah, it seems to work. This is just Rangieri, more of the same. Did a outlet. The sheet polling retaining wall was no good. Just put it into another precast unit out of Hines. The last photo is the Tuakau inlet pump station. So down by Envirofert in Tuakau, we're virtually we're putting a new inlet on that pump. So hopefully we'll get some better photos for the next committee. By the end of be a wrap-up committee, I guess, and we'll have completed photos. So yeah, there'll be a lot more work just about to start. So
Excellent. All right, thank you. Rhythm. And the report's taken as read.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess from a land drainage perspective, I do talk about how important it is, but I do talk about how important it is outside of this meeting as well. So whether I'm talking at the farm gate or I'm talking with people that I associate with in the community, often they'll say, oh, what do you do? And then I give them a spiel they're not quite expecting. And then, I tell them about how important it is, and then I actually ask a lot of them what they do. And it's nowhere near as sexy in terms of that. So yeah, people do get surprised when you do talk to them about, the importance and where food comes from and what the benefits are, and how, the vision is to keep these drainage channels open and working, and we're mandated to do it under an act. We have to do it environmental responsibility, and we get a whole lot of other things chucked at us along the way. But, there is a role for it, and we do have to do it, and we do have to tell people about that. So it's a, I've got a bigger family, and it's a discussion topic at the family table quite often as well as a few drives around the district to look at some of them. So it's never a short drive these days. So the grandkids need to know as well, because they're the ones that, we'll be looking to make sure we've got a productive country in the future. Yes. But coming back to land drainage, so we're running at about 40% of the budget for the year, 38% of the budget. I'm hearing from the guys out there that things are on track. Things are actually a bit slow because it's been a bit windy. Some weed hasn't grown yet. They think it's going to grow, so some of the weed spraying programs are a little bit behind, but they're sensing that with the landowners, having discussions with the landowners so they know where the hot spots are and where they need to be able to respond to. So yeah, in general, it's on track for full delivery at the year, and we're below budget at the moment. At the moment is the key thing around that area. And like I say, a lot of our eyes and ears are with the people on the land. So, well, we've got programs and spray programs that are in place, but then we also do a lot of checking with the guys on the ground to see whether it's needed at the time. Will it be needed a bit later in terms of doing that? Up in the ACAC region, we've got Gary. I think he's through his first rotation. He's probably starting his second rotation, and probably you guys will have a better update on that because he's talking with you guys on a daily basis. So I think the interaction and the relationship between the landowners and our guys is working well, and that's probably a critical part of being able to deliver that program. Because although we do budget for cleaning 10% of the network by drain, by machine and spraying twice a year, then sometimes, 10% means that we look at 10%, we don't clean 10% if we don't need to. So that's the key issue, I guess we get across it. But there's a couple of other slides up on there. Now the full budgets are in the back of in the Appendix C for all of the different subdivisions through there. So we can go to the next slide. Yes, so just looking at it in a graphical way, yeah, we are down on budget. My guys are telling me that they were going to be closer to the full spend on that. If we don't get to the full spend, it'll be because we didn't need to do the work. And then that targeted rate money goes back into the reserve. So there's a couple of things going on. I guess at one of the meetings, we talked about self-administration and the request for the council, I guess, to be more active in the administration of that and request information and you know, to be more responsive out there amongst the different groups. So the annual rates transfer is underway. As part of that, we requested the works programs for, you know, spraying, machine cleaning, and we've provided report templates to the self-administration groups. And that was something that was brought up at previous meetings. So we've been active in sending that out. Now, as part of that, you know, we received some sort of notifications from some of the groups that there was some non-compliances, and that's particularly around using council-approved contractors or not using them. So I guess the position from the council is that council drains is to be undertaken, spraying is to be undertaken by a council-approved contract as per the self-administration agreement. So that was the agreement that the self-administrating parties signed with the council. So it sits in there with it.
One-on-one on that, Brendan. How would the self-administering district get themselves certified? Is that just a 101 on it? There's a process that they could get certification to do it themselves?
I guess they'd have to go through the same hoops and requirements as a council-approved contractor would need to do. And so some of it is about, when we're spraying, that is about having a registered applicator as part of that, undertaking a spray plan, doing some risk assessment around that. Some of the spraying can be done as per the permitted activity rules. And then there's some risk assessment in there and some guidelines that you need to follow. If we're spraying some of the other sprays like a Reglone or something like that, which we're considering, then there's some other application rules on the actual, on the spray containers. There is some requirement around those. We're also considering and looking at potential of aquathol, and have had some discussions with EPA around that. For aquathol or endothol is the spray in there, is that we can use it under a PA rule, but EPA gives us a permission under the HASNO agreement. So we've got a wider permission on the moment that requires a raft of monitoring, sampling and reporting around that. So if we were using that, we'd have to follow that current permission. We may look at getting a reduced permission, but there's some work to be done around that.
So there is a process that self-administering groups can go through to get themselves certified. So it would come down to an individual rather than the group itself, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would come down to, and I guess if it was a permission, our permission is able to be used by the regional council and a certified contractor of the council. So if it was around those more restrictive chemicals, you'd need to be a part of the council approved contractor group. For some of the less ones, you'd need to also make sure you go through it and understand that in terms of what you need to give registered applicants and that. So I guess the point I'm making is that it is quite arduous and it's a little bit more wide ranging than just spraying a chemical. Often the application of the chemical is the easy bit around that, but with council's position around, we do a lot of biosecurity work in that, and that using our permissions around that puts that work at risk as well. So we do need to be mindful that, that as part of that agreement, there is some reasoning in behind why we use council approved contractors.
So I'm assuming that if you've been made aware of it, and I'm not going to ask you to name or otherwise, but you're actually in touch with those particular self-administering groups and working with them on that?
I've been in touch with them and let them know that they shouldn't continue with the practice, that there is the opportunity to use an approved contractor to come in and do that or be aligned with that approved contractor.
Okay. Thank you. Sure, is it?
Sure is. Yeah, look, I suppose I'm the one that's nearly going to go to jail, I suppose. I'll read out a letter that what I sent to
You're not obliged to say anything, but anything you do say.
council. And I think somebody's come down with a bit of a sledgehammer trying to hit attack me. Drainage Board drains. Thanks, Reuben, for your information on the process to alter a clause in the self-administration contract. The clause in question is Drainage Board drains must be sprayed by a council accredited contractor. I believe this clause needs some flexibility, just like the clause which states that self-administration and privatisation of drainage schemes will be considered on a case-by-case basis. All schemes vary in size, and that brings challenges, especially for some smaller schemes in the maintenance spraying in an economical fashion. I'm asking for the clause to be altered so that landowners can spray their board drains themselves on a case-by-case basis. Presently, landowners can spray all drains on their properties, but when drains all come to meet at the board drain, they must employ a council contractor to finish off the catchment. Landowners all have insurance, all spray application certificates, and in some cases have more experience than the council-approved contractors, which will allow them to manage any risk and liability present. I realise this policy has just been approved, but this clause was overlooked as our focus on all schemes being made eligible for self-management and privatisation on a case-by-case was taking precedent at the time. The council must become more flexible to allow targeted ratepayers to reduce costs whenever they can while being compliant. Could council staff consider this change to the self-administration document, and if in agreement, recommend the change to the ICM committee, please? On that point, on the other point, this is we have an annual AGM for self-management, and council indicated they would like to attend some of these schemes. So I asked council to clarify if council charged to attend these meetings, and they said they would. So I've sort of said that don't be surprised if you're not invited. So what I'm getting at is, this policy is still hot off the press, and that I have applied to, and I have to go through the paperwork to be a council contractor.
You have.
I'm in the process of sitting there ready to go, but I wait for a rainy day, I suppose. But what I'm trying to say is that the process is that we're asking for the thing to be discussed, to say that there's flexibility, because in our case, schemes aren't big, and even on the latest one that goes through in July, the horror one, self-administered, we have trouble getting council to come and spray the drains. Like, they didn't turn up for 3 times before Christmas, and when they did, unfortunately, we went and sprayed it again.
So have you actually sent that letter into council, or is that just written?
There's a copy of it.
So there's one come into council already?
Yep. And
So
I'm a bit perturbed that the result of that letter is that we're non-compliant. I mean, we've asked for a review, and I've admitted that I've sprayed some of the drains, and the reason behind it, because we couldn't get a contractor, and it's so windy, I'm not getting them to come for half an hour every morning to try and do the drain. What I mean is we're asking for it to be looked at, that there has to be some flexibility in there, and not just for my drain district, for everybody.
So, Greg, can I just come to you for a moment then? Because that's a request, can somebody give them, Brendan, can I get you to take your, it's a policy that council adopted. So there's a request for a change of policy. What's the process now that will follow?
So the process would be for a paper to be presented or considered for ICMC. That would be accompanied by a staff analysis and recommendation to this request. And that would be then put for the consideration of ICMC. I'd have to double check. I can't remember whether or not the self-administration policy had to go through the full council. I'd have to just double check that. I can't recall.
I think it was.
It just went to ICM.
But then it might have been sent up. Dave, were you, he's our man in charge of democracy. Where are we going with this? Where would it go? Okay, so, but there will be a formal process that this goes through. I just asked that Robbie and I be included in the discussion. We're obviously not there to write the paper, but to have a look at it from a landowner.
The letter I had back from council was it just needs to go to ICM.
Okay, so, all right, can we be brought into just the roundtable discussion on that before it goes too far? Thank you. Thanks for raising it where you are. We won't hold it against you, your admission at this stage. Okay, Brendan, did you wish to? Trevor, can you?
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just Trevor, in your opinion, shouldn't be that onerous for what Ruben's asking for to be compliant for you? Like, you know, like your experience, you know what you're doing, but, you know, grow safe calls and the other, whatever the other requirements are, I would have thought wouldn't have been overly onerous. In your opinion, is that fair or not?
Can we just, thank you.
No, and I will do that. What I was trying to get is I'm trying to prevent every single drainage, self-administered drainage area going through the same thing. Just trying to say that, you know, if you're self-employed, you have insurances, you have this, you know, you have to have the Grow Safe thing anyway. I'm just trying to say if there's some flexibility, like I don't want every single person in the land drain is self-administered to have to go through the whole formal process. And then if that person sells the farm, somebody else has got to come and do it. I was just trying to simplify the process a bit to give some flexibility. And where, you know, the self-administration and privatisation thing, the original presentation was that there was only maybe 6 or 7 schemes that could be self-administered or privatised, and we made the effort to make it all open. So on a case-by-case basis,
Yep.
so everybody had their say. I just thought we could offer something similar here, where there's some flexibility, and maybe council just check that the whoever wants to do has got various, you know, basic certificates, insurance. Yeah, just trying to simplify it a bit, but yeah, if I have to, I'll go through the whole thing.
Thank you for that. We just go to Adam before we go to anyone else.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, staff are very mindful of this, and I think we have taken on board that we do need to check perhaps what that process is through the self-administrating agreement. But I think the process, Mr. Chairman, is that there is a formal process, and we will, like Greg said, we'll take a request back through the ICMC that's a council-approved document. But also, I've just asked Ruben now whether there is an amendment or a review clause in the self-administrating agreement, just provide some future guidance on this, just around the approval process, because these things are dynamic. But in saying that, you know, supporting what Ruben said, there are rules in place for that reason. We want to make sure that we are compliant, and if we need to sort of just provide a little bit more definition and clarity around that, then so be it. But just supporting Ruben's comment there that we want to work with the landowners, but we also need to honour the self-administrating agreement.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah, just a question. Has there ever been any incident where owner ratepayers have been spraying drains that they've actually had any negative impact as a result of their activity?
Come to Ruben.
Yeah, if I can answer that, Mr. Chairman, we probably wouldn't know because we, up until now, haven't really formally known that that's been going on. So I'm not sure whether all of the tests that would need to be done or what was going on. So, yeah, so not necessarily, but I guess that's not the point. I guess when we talk about intent, the intent of the self-administration agreement was that we entered it as, you know, as equal parties, and we followed the rules within there. And all I'm just doing is bringing this to the forefront to say that these are live administration agreements that we should be following. If we want to change them, let's go through a process to do it and formalise it and make sure the risks are understood and managed so that you can continue to farm long term. Because if you don't do it right, then we may not be the ones sitting here that are looking at it. So it's about managing risks and keeping this legitimate long term.
Yeah, and I'm reading between the lines here, but I think the way you seem to be approaching it, and this is a first situation, and let's talk about it and find a way forward. Trevor's responded by looking at getting a certificated, and he's made a request, which is the right thing to do. So there's processes in place that will take its course. Yeah, so I could just go to Craig before I come back to Adam.
We've got about 6 kilometres of board drains on our farm, and the contractor sprays a narrow corridor through them. They're obviously fenced wider, and so we do a lot of spraying to keep weeds at bay that are growing on your drains. Does that mean we're non-compliant?
Prima facie, probably, yes.
Because you'll be dreaming of, we'll ever stop because we've been invaded with weeds just everywhere.
Yes, I guess the process for actually spraying the drains is that is that we're not spraying up the banks because you don't want them to erode away. So you're more spraying at the water level and up the sides, as far as I'm aware. So there is a weed maintenance issue from the top of the bank, I guess, so that spray line out to the fence lines.
Make it padded.
Well, that hasn't answered the question though. Is that saying we're illegal? Are we non-compliant for spraying the weeds in the fenced
No,
drain?
so the land within that fence board drain is your land. So I guess it's your responsibility to maintain that. We're talking about the drainage channel itself.
So we're sweet as. Every farmer's sweet as then.
So you don't ask me for a permission I can't give you.
Yeah, I think a generalisation is a dangerous thing to get into in this forum. If you wanted to, you could invite Reuben in his busy schedule to come out and
No,
just.
why would you self-incriminate yourself?
Well, I appreciate it, but you raised the question. If you want an answer.
Well, no, I know will be because weeds grow very quickly across the drain. So you just spray wherever you are. I'm spraying when you've got board drains in the neighbour, between you and the neighbour, you're spraying weeds on the neighbour's place.
Yep.
So you're drifting across, like we're spraying the drain effectively, not the whole length, but certain parts of it. So we will be non-compliant. And there will be thousands of farmers that will be non-compliant with that rule. So the rule has just got to be oomphed out or you'll be creating such a massive problem, it'll be frightening.
There's another one in that book you need to look at, Trevor. All right, Reuben, carry on.
Yeah, I think that's the main areas. I guess the other thing to talk about is that with the fast track consenting processes kicking off, we're getting a lot of interest from around the city areas, I guess. So we've got another one that's coming out on the Hamilton East side. It was the top of the Korimatua system, where CDL have got something like, I don't know, there's quite a big block of land in there. So we're trying to keep an eye on those as well, just to see what's going on, so they're not having too much effect on our land drainage schemes. That's sitting right at the top of that one. I'm hearing Hamilton City Council, not necessarily, they're looking at it as well because can they supply all the services they need out there? So it's that urbanisation that's on our sites as well. Just to let you know that's still happening and we're still looking at that.
So, okay, thank you. Can we go to Matthew and then Robbie and then Craig, and we'll try and wrap it up. We'll take a 10-minute break. Yeah, we want to give time for the discussion on whether a resolution can be achieved today or whether it has to come back for the next meeting. So, all right, in that order, Matthew, Robbie and Craig.
This is a very localised issue, but Reuben and I have banged heads a bit relating to having screens in front of Archimedes screw pump stations. I just want to refer you to page 29, the bar graph, and where it shows you that compartment 3, which is an Archimedes screw pump that has no screens, and and yeah, it's an Archimedes pump. That's got a cost, drainage cost per year of $15,000, whereas compartment 4, which has screens, are basically identical compartments. That's got a cost of $45,000 a year. And I just want to point out that, you know, screens can make a huge difference to your cost of drainage. And I just wanted to sort of point out, I've got some photographs here of the compartment 3 pump, which is doesn't have a screen now and is about to get one. And the farmers in that compartment have become quite complacent over the years because they know that, they've become complacent in terms of the importance of drain cleaning because they know they pump the weeds. But you know, they're now going to get a new screens costing about $1 million, and they're going to have to be really, really careful. You know, they're going to have to manage their weeds much more in future, much more carefully in future than they do now. And I've got some photographs to just show you the weeds in the compartment 3 pump station as they exist today. I just want to show you.
Just pass them around there. Just give them to Will and then move. The reality is you've raised this right throughout the process. I think staff have listened to those concerns, and we are where we are. It'll certainly be reviewed once those screens are in place as to whether they are the right thing to have put in place or not. So that's my understanding, is that this has been consulted on, it's been raised.
Yeah, just to touch on that, numerous landowner meetings, and we've discussed at length the screens going on at Mangatawhiri Compartment 3. And just to clarify, Compartment 4 is a couple of McEwens that has a very narrow screen on it. The screen proposed for Mangatawhiri Compartment 3 is 150 mil wide compared to the 50 mil wide. So we have worked with the landowners to trial it and see how we go. It's the same as what's on at Churchill East, and Churchill East screens are working real well. So the plan is to put them on and work with landowners to track how the progress is going. And no doubt we'll probably talk about it at a later meeting once it's all built, and pros and cons. Yeah, so it's just a bit of an update.
Okay,
from
thank you.
here.
We've got Robbie. Robbie.
I'll pass all the ones
Okay.
about the spraying, and I'll don't think
Craig.
On page 31, 44, you mention as each blockage is removed from the Mangawara, you've got health and safety mentioned, and it looks like it was a major job that because nowhere else do you bother about mentioning health and safety and what a big job it was. What happened there that was so much highlighted? What was the reasoning for that?
44.
Yeah, so in terms of that, I guess that was included in there just to demonstrate that the guys do have to go through some sort of risk assessment when they are doing blockages. And they did do a lot of blockages up through the Mangawara. And there's a lot of tree burning to be done at some time, because it was a major bit of work through there, clearing through the poplars that were at their 30-year life. And I guess the thing about that is that some of the guys that planted those poplars or part of that scene are still here, so they're now cutting them and coppicing them. So yeah, that was just really more to demonstrate that when the guys are out there, and that was quite a big job, that they do have a look at it and do their risk assessments. They do their job safety assessments on a daily basis. They've got, I guess they've got operating procedures they do. So this was just to demonstrate it's a process they go through, really.
Go to Trevor and then Robbie.
I know we're going to have a break, but there was 2 other points I brought up to go on the agenda today, and they're covered in the drain. One of them's covered in the drainage thing here. Is I'm asking that we pay no more concession payments for Waikiri West to DOC, and the reason being, it's in here, so I'm allowed to talk about it. The reason being is that the latest self-administration agreement I have here, and it's the same rules in the 2002 Local Body Act, is highlighted in this agreement, which is in fair comment is perfect, is council's access to properties within drainage areas. It says here the council has all the rights to enter public and private land, clean board drains. That's highlighted and that's perfect. That's what it should be. And so why are we going to all the performance to go through Dockland and iwi land to get concessions and all sorts of things here, where it says in here, concession was applied and agreed with DOC and the maintenance activity is completed. It is noted that only part of the work undertaken was on public conservation land and with the remainder land owned by Waikato Tainui, while approval to undertake works on this land was a separate process. You know, what are we even talking to them for? It says here, clear as a bell. This is only printed last year, that you've got access to this land to do board drains. And the Waikiri West thing has been a disaster from council point of view. And so what I'm asking for is resolution that we don't pay any more money. Because if we're just paying money to DOC just to fill out, so because they have a fee for filling out paperwork, well, why can't any of you guys apply for a fee of 4,500 every time a digger turns up? Why can't anybody else apply to the drainage board, to the council? I want some money because you're bringing water through here. I mean, we've been through this process, but it's bloody rotten to the core. And I just say, we paid once, zero. We're allowed to clean board drains through public and private land. Get on with it.
I'm just not sure, Michelle, before you respond. It wasn't deliberate that you two were put together.
This is
As I would say, the road between two thorns.
It's a serious issue because it sets a serious precedent that somebody else can take up the option of just saying, hey, and it's very bad. And it's not for access. Anybody can ask for work to be done in a particular way on their property, and I agree with that. The council, we all know, we're playing ball on that, so that's sorted out. But to ask for money just because you have a policy of asking for concessions, I think it needs to be revisited, and the simple way to do that is not pay any more money.
Before we come to Michelle, Greg, I'd like you to come to the table, please.
That's all right.
No. So I would like you to come to the table, please.
And while he's coming, the other third item on the thing was...
we can only take one at a time.
The really basic thing was we, along with council, we did a very good trial on using pre-glown to kill oxygen weed in the drains.
Can we deal with one at a time? He's here now.
Sorry.
Greg, do you have any response to the comments as Director of ICM?
So this has obviously been an issue that I've been watching very closely and involved with very closely, in fact, over the last few years. What I know, it's very clear, what I have clarity on is that we have requirements under the Conservation Act in terms of operating within public conservation land. We have requirements under the Resource Management Act as well, and that was discussed earlier in terms of a separate consent, because there was consents and concessions involved here. The information I've received and the advice I've received is very clear about the position that we need to take in this regard. What I would say is that we have undertaken an extremely efficient process to get this concession in place and had a really good partnership with the Department of Conservation to get this in place. The teams have worked very well together to understand what's been required for this work. The work that's required is very similar to what we do in any other drain, whether it's in private land or on public conservation land. And it's, as you rightly pointed out, there's an added complexity there that the land is not just public conservation land. There is some land owned by local iwi as well, which has its own requirements, but those have been well and truly satisfied through this process that we've run through.
So, okay, you've heard Trevor's request that we pass a resolution to not pay any more. Can you respond directly to those comments?
So that resolution would be contrary to the concession that we have agreed with the Department of Conservation. It would be, in my view, contrary to the requirements of the Conservation Act. And I think it would be a dangerous position for council to take, and certainly one that I wouldn't support.
So what you're saying is that resolution would be ultra vires, contrary to law? Okay. In the consensus of a safe environment, Michelle, are you willing to respond?
I will. I think first point I wanted to make, and I think Greg has very clearly, this is an agreement between the Department of Conservation and the Regional Council. So you decide not to pay, that will then become an issue between the Department and the Regional, that concession and what that will mean. And most likely, yeah, the action and other things then be taken. Not that we want to go down any of those roads for the sake of, I think it's a couple of $100 a year cost.
4,500 for every time a digger's there.
No, that 4,000 across the 10 years.
So 450 a year.
The activity fee is that 1,000. I don't know the exact
Correct.
numbers now. I can get it for you, but it's split over the 10 years of the concession document. We had fee waived the bejesus out of it, would be how I'd describe it.
Okay, well, we might not have been informed properly there, but we were told every time a digger turns up, which they allowed for every 4 years.
Yeah, so we're going into the detail. Let's keep it high level.
Yeah.
So the concession was for a 10-year period, 4,500 over that period, averaging at 450 per annum.
Well, that's
So
not what
I can get the details of it if you really like, but it's in the hundreds per year when you split it across the.
and we worked it out, I think was the highest amount any individual ratepayer would be paying is about $280 per annum because one had a fairly large area of that catchment. So probably.
That wasn't per outlet though, was it? That was over the Whangamarino catchment. So,
Yeah, it's not.
Waikiri, sorry, Waikiri catchment, sorry.
So if I could offer the committee clarification, so that the scope of the concession is over a number of named drains that flow into Lake Waikiri. And the terms of the fee relate to when we do need to do the mechanical cleaning for these drains, that the fee will be applied. But the anticipation is that cleaning will only be required once or twice in a decade. Obviously, it depends on the weed growth and what the requirements are. But as I said, through working closely with the department, we negotiate quite a significant fee reduction to account for the fact that we won't be in there every year. There is work that we do separately outside of mechanical cleaning, spraying, for example, to keep the access track available. And that is able to be done with that minimal rate or minimal fee.
Yeah, I think we're talking worst case scenario, Trevor. The reality is, yeah, Robbie and I were heavily involved in advocating the landowners' desires on this issue. And it was a pretty tense meeting we had, you were present, where we got Malcolm over the line. And it's everybody's acted in good faith. DOC conceded what they really wanted, how much they wanted, it reduced the price. Greg's outlined that. I think it personally, as a councillor, we achieved a hell of a lot. We got the regional council, who I will say I believe was entrenched in its view. When we got Chris to have a look at it, he had a different outlook on it, and somebody gave him advice which the council has acted on, which was contrary to the decision 4 years earlier. I think for me, it's now time to sit back and say, okay, this is what has been anticipated. Is that turning into reality? What is the true cost? I know if someone was coming through my land, I would want to have some sort of say, and if there was, there may be a cost to that. It's not unreasonable. The drain has been there for 100 years or more. So why shouldn't we be able to continue doing it? I understand all that. So in all honesty, I felt we'd gone through the ringer over it, but that's what you elected us to do. And I'm really pleased personally with the outcome we got on behalf of the landowners. But this world, you know, we don't get something for nothing very often.
I appreciate it all, but and this will be, theory the last time it'll come up, but the reality is that what I'm saying is that the council, and this is where an attitude change is required. Council already has rules in place for board drains, and they come with quite strong preferences for council to clean the drains, and yet we seem to go down years upon years of dialogue where the rules are already there if council wish to do it. And we seem to be getting beaten up where our predecessors have already given us permission to do certain stuff. We keep going over this, and where, as I say, it's highlighted in the self-administered thing only 6 months ago that rules and regulations are there. Yes, you have to inform people. Don't get me wrong, inform, but not go through a whole drama just to get a bloody drain clean.
Look, just during the last week or so, I have been thinking, particularly when we've been talking about the FMS, NES 2020, we've got a set of rules that were put in place by a left government. We've now got a right government, centre right. They're going to put the rules differently. Who knows when there will be a change, but a change of government is inevitable. We swing back the other way. We go through this whole process of, uncertainty, and then we go back. To me, that's the biggest issue facing us, because we are continuously dealing and expecting our staff to react and respond to the whims of a cyclical government, rather than stepping back and saying, what is the best for the environment? Why can't we just settle on a set of rules that, unless something exceptional comes along that we need to change,
You need to employ more ecologists.
yeah, so whilst this is a specific issue to a set of drains, the bigger issue, I think, is what's really making it difficult for us to work in this space. So coming back to this issue, I just want to give Michelle a response and we'll see whether I really want to get to a break, so I'm going to...
Yeah, I'll be quick. I just want to make that point around the land that we're talking about here. Land held under the Conservation Act, conservation purpose. We are mandated to make sure that the activities happen on that preserve, that land and the values that it holds. That's what the law tells us to. So it's not that, there's no's or whatever, as we've said all the way through. This is a particular instance where there was an activity that had occurred in the past that was undertaken in a way that was not consistent with how we want that land managed. So we went down the road of the concession. Just to reply to this piece, this isn't an right. This section is referring to the Local Government Act. So yes, the council has powers in various things, but it doesn't have the public conservation land. Nobody has, apart from recreation and those sorts of things, but to undertake certain activity, there's not a straightforward right by the Land Drainage Act or any others that override that requirement to get permission to do what, unless it's excluded in the Conservation Act. But these activities aren't maintenance activities, land drainage, all kinds of different uses of land still require permission to do it.
Okay, I can leave that there. Do you need to make these comments, or can we just go to, okay, Craig, and then Peter, and then no more? Or Robbie, you've got your light on, so those three, and I'm killing it.
Just in my previous life, when I was the chair, we had an issue with the Railways Department about weeds growing up their lines. We came to a good neighbours sort of concession on that, so they actually sprayed it without, because they didn't have to keep their weeds under control. I just wonder whether there's a process that the council can go, instead of going through all that you're talking about legislation, is to form a good neighbours policy with the Department of Conservation to achieve some of these goals that Trevor's talking about. Because as long as the good neighbour has certain conditions, there were certain conditions put under the Neighbours Act with the railways that we put in there, it was for the Waikato Regional Council's area, that we could achieve these without having to go through a consent or through this process. Michelle, I just think...
So Peter, if we can just jump in there, one of the very first meetings that Robbie and I went to when we joined this council was a meeting over this sort of activity. And Doc had a very strong message. You guys haven't got it right in the past. You've shat on us, and so we're being tough. And that's where we're at. So Doc has responded because of past activities by this council.
I can understand that, but I can understand that, Mr. Chair. But the thing is, if you can have a Good Neighbours Act and write those policies there and clearly in there what you've actually got to define, I think that might help something. But
Yeah,
that was
the concession's got some activities in it that if that's achieved, Doc may have more confidence going forward, I suspect. But
I was just going to say, in most cases, there is a good relationship with a landowner and it's not required.
Yes.
That exact conversation happens and away you go, you know. It doesn't exclude it for certain.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, I just sort of commend the council on actually sort of a pragmatic solution to this. But what concerns me a little bit is the precedent of the fact of paying for that. I've no problem with consultation and working with the landowner. But the moment you actually start making payments, is that the thin end of the wedge?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we've got a minister who has been, he sat there and I sat next to him and I put the scenario around Lake Waikare to him and he said he was going to look into it. There's been subsequent meetings and correspondence of various people in the room. And I think the bland response came back as my officials tell me, blah, blah, blah. So we're looking at it, but it's going to take a couple of years before that review is complete. So you're stuck with it in the meantime. All right. Robbie, and then I'm going to close this off for a break.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand the conversation that's going around the room, but I just want to make it clear what the meeting that myself and Noel, Trevor, we were only in council for 3 months and we had to sit with Michelle when it was a really confrontational meeting of what was happening down in, and I thought, holy crap, this is what this is what I'm getting into, Jesus. And from there to the relationship we have with Michelle now, you cannot, I think we're getting a bit out of the $4,000, but hey, we got a good relationship. Michelle's here at the meeting. We have a good discussion. It's respectful. I think that's way more important, the $4,000, that we have a good relationship than a nasty one. And it was us that weren't meeting our service level that caused that to happen as well. So you should have gone to council and said, it's because you that happened. It wasn't because of Doc.
Will council repay Mr. Lumsden and his team?
Well, that's a court
every year.
Yeah, well, what happened there will end up in mitigation or whatever it is to resolve that. That's not our issue. So I think that's where that needs to be left, Trev. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate it.
But all I'm saying is I believe in 2.5 years we've built a good relationship with Doc and Fish and Game, and we're respectful conversations go around the table, and that's worth a lot, because next time something has to happen, we can have an easy discussion and talk about it instead of being. And I don't like those conversations because
yeah. And so Trevor, to your initial opening comments, I'm going to say that at this stage, such a resolution would be ultra vires, contrary to law, and therefore it would be inappropriate for me to take that resolution. And okay. All right, I'm going to adjourn the meeting for 15 minutes until 12, and we will then reconvene. Thank you.